You finally sleep after being deprived. Your subjective sense of alertness has already begun to stabilize. Your brain is telling you the worst is over. It is not. Your inflammatory markers are still elevated. Your episodic memory is still compromised, and the biological repair your body needed most has not finished running. Feeling recovered and being recovered are two different biological events, and they do not happen at the same time. Here is the mechanism underneath that gap. What genuine recovery actually requires at the cellular level, and why almost everything the culture tells you to do after a bad night is aimed at the feeling, not the biology. Your brain does not treat all repairs as equally urgent. It runs a queue. Slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage of non-REM sleep, characterized by large synchronized delta wave oscillations across the cortex, gets prioritized first. The body is doing triage. The most critical systems get service before the less critical ones. The feeling of alertness returns quickly because the systems governing basic arousal and wakefulness are repaired early in that queue. The systems governing memory, immune recalibration, and molecular gene expression are further back. They take longer, they require more nights, and they give you no subjective signal that they are still incomplete. That mismatch is not a flaw. It is a feature the biology built deliberately, keeping you functional enough to survive while the deeper repairs run in the background. The problem is that in the modern world, functioning and recovered feel identical. They are not. Here is what is actually happening during that first recovery night at the level where the real work occurs. As your brain transitions into slow-wave sleep, the locus coeruleus, a small cluster of neurons in the brainstem that produces norepinephrine, begins releasing it in slow, rhythmic pulses at approximately 0.02 Hz. Those norepinephrine oscillations drive a corresponding rhythm in cerebral blood volume, and that vascular rhythm acts as a pump pushing cerebrospinal fluid through the glymphatic network, flushing the interstitial spaces between neurons of the metabolic waste that accumulated during every hour you were awake. Research published in Cell in January 2025 by a team including investigators at the University of Rochester confirmed this mechanism in precise detail. It is the norepinephrine-driven vasomotion during natural NREM sleep that powers glymphatic clearance, not simply the absence of wakefulness. The pump requires the specific oscillatory conditions of deep sleep to run at full capacity. Think of it like a building whose plumbing system can only fully flush when all the floors are empty and the pressure is correctly calibrated. The building has to be genuinely quiet, not just dimly lit. A fitful night, a night interrupted by noise or alcohol, or a sleeping aid that suppresses the natural oscillatory architecture, is a building that went through the motions of closing without the plumbing running properly. The waste stays. You wake up and feel fine. The brain has not been cleaned. Your brain managed a full night of norepinephrine-driven cerebrospinal fluid cycling through a network of aquaporin, 4 line channels, to flush amyloid-beta and metabolic byproducts from 37 trillion cells worth of neural tissue. The response most people give this system is a double espresso and an early meeting. It is a remarkable mismatch. If this is changing how you think about what recovery from a bad night actually means, consider subscribing and share this with someone who has been telling themselves one good night is enough. There is more of this to come, and the next piece goes deeper into the biology. Now here is the part that David Dingus and colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania's Division of Sleep and Chronobiology have documented repeatedly across decades of controlled laboratory work, and that almost no sleep advice communicates accurately. After a single night of total sleep deprivation, one full recovery night of 8 hours restores subjective alertness almost completely. People report feeling fine. They believe they are back to baseline. A 2020 study from the same group, published in Scientific Reports, measured what actually happened to the hippocampus and episodic memory during that same recovery period. 2 full nights of recovery, sleep restored hippocampal connectivity. Episodic memory had not fully recovered. The feeling of being better and the biology of being better diverged measurably, reproducibly, at a structural level inside the brain. The Dinges group's earlier work on chronic sleep restriction is more unsettling still. Participants restricted to 5 hours of sleep per night across 7 consecutive nights then given 3 full nights of recovery sleep, had not fully restored psychomotor vigilance performance by the end of those 3 nights. 3 nights of recovery did not repay 7 nights of restriction. The debt accumulated faster than it repaid, and the subjective experience of recovery stabilized after 2 or 3 days regardless, whether or not the underlying performance had followed, meaning the worse the accumulated debt, the less reliably the person could detect it. The body was reporting fine. The performance data said otherwise. This is the mechanism that makes the common behaviors around sleep recovery so specifically counterproductive. The long weekend sleep-in feels like the obvious solution. Sleep in, catch up, reset. Kenneth Wright at the University of Colorado Boulder tested this directly. In a 2019 study published in Current Biology, healthy young adults who slept insufficiently across the work week and then slept ad libitum on the weekend as long as they wanted, with no restriction, did not reverse the metabolic dysregulation caused by the sleep restriction. On some measures, the pattern of insufficient sleep, followed by weekend recovery, actually made things worse, further disrupting the timing of the body's internal clocks rather than resetting them. Sleeping in late on Saturday shifts when your suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master circadian clock in the hypothalamus, made up of approximately 20,000 neurons, and receiving direct light input via the retinohypothalamic tract, expects light to arrive. That shift cascades into every organ that uses the circadian cortisol signal to time its own internal clock. You have not recovered. You have added a time zone problem on top of the original debt. Weekend catch-up sleep is one of the most widely practiced health strategies in the modern world. It is also, on the metabolic evidence, moderately counterproductive. Nobody has put this on a billboard. The billboards are mostly for mattresses. The long afternoon nap after a bad night produces a similar problem from a different direction. Adenosine, the molecule that accumulates in the basal forebrain during waking hours and drives sleep pressure, is partially cleared during a long nap. That clearance feels like relief. What it actually does is reduce the adenosine load that would otherwise build through the afternoon and evening, deepening the sleep pressure that drives the first recovery night's slow-wave architecture. A long nap borrows from tonight to pay for this afternoon. The following night becomes lighter, shallower, and less restorative precisely when you needed it to be deepest. The glymphatic pump runs at reduced capacity. The queue of outstanding repairs gets longer. Caffeine presents the same structural problem. It fills the adenosine receptors in the basal forebrain without clearing the adenosine itself, suppressing the detection of the sleep signal without reducing its actual accumulation. After a bad night, caffeine restores the feeling of alertness. It does not accelerate the inflammatory recalibration, the memory restoration, or the glymphatic clearance. It delays the subjective experience of deprivation while the biological backlog quietly grows. This is not an argument against coffee. It is an argument for understanding what caffeine is actually doing, which is managing the symptom while leaving the mechanism untouched. What the research does not yet confirm with the precision this question deserves is the exact rate of biological recovery per recovery night across different types and durations of sleep deprivation. The Dingy's data, the Wright data, and the multi-omics findings from 2023 are convergent in showing that recovery takes longer than intuition suggests. But the precise night-by-night trajectory of inflammatory marker normalization, molecular expression, restoration, and hippocampal memory recovery in humans at scale is still being mapped. The honest answer to how many nights of good sleep full recovery requires is more than most people allocate and fewer than is required for any alarm. The mechanism runs. It simply runs slowly, and it runs without announcing its progress. Here is what the evidence does support. The single most effective thing the biology responds to is consistent sleep timing, going to bed, and waking at the same time across recovery nights, including the morning after a bad night. Not sleeping in. Not truncating. Consistent. The suprachiasmatic nucleus uses the timing of light input to drive the cortisol rhythm that synchronizes every peripheral clock in the body. In the liver, the pancreas, the immune cells, the gut. When the morning alarm sounds and light hits the retina at the same time it did yesterday, the SCN recalibrates. Cortisol rises on schedule. The peripheral clocks stay coordinated. The recovery sleep that follows that evening is architecturally cleaner, deeper, slow-wave content, better oscillatory conditions for the glymphatic pump, a more restorative cue. The consistent wake time is not discipline for its own sake. It is the environmental signal the master clock uses to run the repair correctly. Your body has a recovery mechanism. It is sophisticated, it is sequenced, and it runs without your supervision. What it does not do is run fast. It does not announce when it is finished. And it does not align what you feel with what has biologically resolved. Because those two signals travel on different timelines, through different systems, arriving days apart. Tell me in the comments after watching this, does a bad night of sleep feel different to you now than it did before? Specifically, I am interested in whether knowing the mechanism changes what you decide to do the morning after. The next time you wake from a recovery night feeling almost entirely fine, you will know what that means. Not that the repair is complete. That the part of your brain responsible for reporting the repair status recovered first, leaving the rest of the queue running silently, without a signal, precisely as the biology intended.